the
There
players.
we
Everything's
go.
good in the world once again. And I'm just ready for this. Something we've not really touched on, even though I do feel it's a bit of a tradition now, is talking about speed of play. Jarla, along with Bunny Hopper, known as not the fastest player in the world, whereas XBlyzes is the ultimate blitz Hearthstone player if such a game would exist one day.
Yep.
So very excited to see how this one does play out. But we're going to dive straight into the important matchup. We have X versus Warrior right now. That X, of course, being the Galakron Warlock for Jarla for now. But all focus is on XBlyzes getting a win with this Warrior. That's pretty much how he's going to win this series overall.
All right, so next game. Opening hand, double sticky finger, Cartoon Defender. So I guess already we should start to talk about some of these alternate win conditions that we potentially came up with here as the Warrior, because it doesn't look like plan A of just load up some weapons and go face is really going to get XBlyzes too far in this situation. So
right.
XBlyzes has a bit of an issue here because he's playing the skipper version of the deck, but I did experiment with the idea of just like straight up fatiguing the Warlock, since they draw so many cards from life tap and from 4-mana draw 3 and all those kind of things, but the removal just doesn't quite seem to get there. And then we tried out something that we christened the Raven method. Raven, would you like to explain that to everyone?
So it's genius, right?
Yeah.
If your opponent plays loads of clunky weapon removal cards, because most cards that remove weapon or steal weapons aren't well statted, just don't play weapons, and then they have bad cards in their hand all the time. Being a bit more serious, it does involve some weird issues, like now, for example. This isn't really the outcome of this strategy, but more of just convenient timing.
Yeah.
The 2 sticky fingers in hand, I think Jarla wants to life tap here, but he can't because he's got all these other cards that he can't really play and won't be able to play for the foreseeable future. He has what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops, a 6 drop, and 2 drops in hand, along with a coin, of course. So that is just a lot of mana and a lot of hand space used up, that if XBlyzes wasn't playing weapons, Jarla has the weird decision of whether he wants to tempo out a sticky finger, which is obviously ludicrous to even suggest.
Yeah, I think it's pretty reasonable to pass here from Jarla's perspective. He could play either of his 2-cost cards as well. I'd be perfectly fine with that. He does end up going with the Mohawk. But yeah, so both of those strategies just came up a little bit short, but the straight-up aggro Bomb Warrior strategy came up enormously short. You see XBlyzes, like, no real surprise here. He is just going for the first port of call of just try and get bombs shuffled as quickly and as early as possible and just hope the weapon destruction isn't there. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We just found that this didn't really work out, so we kind of went on experimental things that you could do instead. But honestly, just on a soul read on XBlyzes as a personality and as a player, I would have almost bet everything I own that he would just take this line of just saying, okay, I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm just playing my cards,
Yeah. Yeah, I think as well, the strategy of not playing weapons was a little bit, had a caveat of, well, if you only really drew weapons in the opening of the game, or, if your hand was only weapons, you can't just pass every turn for the whole game. So, of course, to an extent, in these, when we talk about these deep strategies on how to think really outside the box, sometimes you have to just do what your hand tells you to do, because otherwise you're losing a game of Hearthstone because you're not playing one.
Jarla gives this play the eyes. Second Corsair Cache into second Wrench Caliber into second Sticky Finger into most likely GG here. Yeah, XBlyzes gives the nod. Not too surprised about the situation. But now, not only is XBlyzes' win condition completely shut down, but he's just facing down lethal coming the other way pretty much at this point.
Yeah, that's the awkward issue of the way this plays out when it plays out like this. Not only is the Warlock stopping you hitting them and dealing loads of damage, that they're hitting you back twice as hard, right? Because they're stealing your weapon, shuffling the bombs, hitting you in the face. Nice, a convenient pirate outcome there, though, for XBlyzes, so he does get to actually chip off the last charge of that Wrench Caliber. And XBlyzes, although, again, looking to be in a rough spot due to how the early game has played out, he does have Galakron, which I think no matter the strategy we can agree on is just a generally powerful card in the matchup if you get it early.
It is, yeah. The problem that I ran into of trying to stick any kind of reasonable threat, like the big minion you get from Galakron, the Deathwing, whatever it'll be, like even trying to like land Krastenov and have it stick for a couple of turns, is that you don't really have enough stuff to bait the removal, and this deck plays plenty of removal. Like you see here, Crazy Netherwing could just come down and clear up this board, and Jarla would still end with a Dark Skies and a Plague of Flames in his hand to be able to deal with the next situation. So it's very, very hard to actually stick minion presence with Bomb Warrior against this deck, which I think is one of the reasons why it is so effective, is that it has all the angles covered, right? I think some of the decks that we've seen people try and counter Bomb Warrior with, they counter the weapon part, but they don't necessarily have ways to deal with a 12-12 if Deathwing just comes down on the board, and like sometimes that can steal a win condition. So I think this is a very intelligently put together deck on the part of the players who have brought it this week.
Yeah, I agree. The more we played it, the more we tried it, the more I was like, oh well, yeah, this just works. Like, I'm not really sure what the Warrior's supposed to do. Trust us, we tried. But still, Blyze is just going to go for that Galakron. Did get that Armor Smith as well, which again is going to be buffed up on the far right of his hand there. But the real problem is now, Jarla, because he doesn't have like a turbo way to kill Blyze, he can start to just take a slightly slower approach, just drop this card down, it has to be traded into and healed. Then you can have the Shield of Galakron along with the Devoted to get the Galakron procs going, and also just chuck a ton of minions on the board, because one other thing as well, outside of players who are choosing Whirlwind and I guess this risky skipper version, which we've already seen one skipper get played, there aren't good ways for the Warrior to kill 1/1 imps.
Nope.
Do you really want to Blade Storm some 1/1s? Like, not really.
Well, that's also the auxiliary problem, is that every time, or a lot of the time, when the Warlock plays a threat, it comes with a complementary suite of free 1/1s. So if you just want to Blade Storm their Shield of Galakron, you can't, because 2 1/1s have come alongside that. So suddenly Blade Storm just becomes a very, very bad card in the matchup in a lot of positions, and it can be a real struggle sometimes.
Yeah, I think they're going for the Shield of Galakron there, but I think for ease of mana, I like the card. So I think something I've seen from multiple players in multiple decks is not getting Kartuk down when you have the mana, and then late game it becomes significantly more awkward to drop down, because there's just, I don't know if it's just the decks I've been watching play this, but like getting Kartuk plus something else powerful down in the same turn just never really lines up that well.
Yeah, it's
I like it coming down now for Jarla.
I agree. It's a very expensive card, and I think this matchup in particular, there's no real way for Blyze to play around the healing here. Like, it just happens. Once you've spent the 6 on Kartuk Defender, you are healing for 6. So getting it down, putting a roadblock in the way, especially when Blyze is clearly looking to ramp up some Galakron damage here, makes sense.
And you see just how tough this matchup actually is. Blyze probably taking a longer turn than he's ever taken before in his life of not playing a card, because he's got to think of a way to actually dig himself out, or even if he can dig himself out.
What more can I ask for?
I honestly think he might have been trolling.
I was thinking if he was just thinking about just conceding or not. I think he was just thinking, you know what? Yeah, probably don't win this. Let's just get out, get to the next game, go again.
I might be wrong here, but it didn't feel like he was engaged in like deep thought that turn. It felt like he was just doing his Jarla impression, where he just sat there for 70 seconds and then made the play he knew he was going to make immediately.
Potentially true.
All right, this Plague of Flames can put some work in now alongside one of the Galakron Invokes, if Jarla would like to.
Yeah, it's just too good, isn't it? Like, Plague of Flames is just insane.
Yes.
Like, you could probably win this matchup without Plagues in your deck, honestly. But the fact that they're there and it's so easy to remove the few minions that Warrior even plays, it is absolutely insane. I mean, in testing, we were talking about you can just play Kartuk Plague of Flames in some moments, because you guarantee the healing, you have something left over, and so what if you used a 6-cost minion to plague 1 minion on the other side of the board? You only need to kill about 6 minions total all game to kill all the Warrior minions anyway.
Yeah, I think that's particularly useful in matchups where they have like Sap or Blackjack Stunner or Transform effects, right? So you can immediately bank some of that healing when you need it from the Kartuk Defender and still leave
Silence
the
or
second
Kane
part
in
behind.
Demon Hunter.
Exactly, yeah.
Raising that second Devoted Maniac as well to, again, just put some pressure on the board, because we talked a lot about the resilience of this Galakron Warlock, but this was also a deck that did used to just burst you down as well. It's not going to quite do it as much anymore, but it still has the ability to with double Nether Breath. Or bombs, they also work, I've heard.
They do. Jarla chose to go minion development here. I think there was a few things going on that turn. Firstly, because he saw the buffed up Galakron minion there with the Armorsmith. He was happy to use the Plague of Flames to kill it, because now he's confident that Dark Skies will be able to kill anything else. I think if he hadn't seen the buffed up minion, he might fear that buffed up minion being Deathwing, for example, and want to hold on to the Plague of Flames, because Dark Skies might not necessarily get the job done against buffed up Deathwing. But then secondly, he chose to spend his mana by playing his 4-drop instead of just oozing away likely the final real weapon outside of upgrades that he's going to see this game. So this is a chunk of damage that he's sort of chosen to take here, where he could have just oozed it away.
That is true, and these were the moments as well, right? Or are the moments as well, where you don't really plan for this, and then you suddenly look at your health and you're like, oh, hang on, I'm on like 12 health and there might be like 2 bombs in the deck. This gets a little bit scary.
Zephyrus not active, of course. At the very least, there are still 2 bombs remaining in the deck.
I wonder if this is ever a Kronk's turn, actually. Like Kronk's Nether Breath the Armorsmith, trade the 2-1 in.
Yeah, I like that.
And ooze as well. Like, so I do think the Galakron does offer. Easy.
Careful. That does not activate his Zephyrus. He still has not played a Veiled Worshipper or a Dragonblight Cultist this game. Or, sorry, has not drawn one. He's probably going to have to use Sacrificial Pact here after taking the bomb damage. Yeah, seems reasonable.
Yeah, Sacrificial Pact, unless you're, I don't know, setting up lethal, is pretty much one of those, if you draw it and you can play it, you probably play it as long as it heals you. Because you just bank it, right? Galakron, sorry, Deathwing going to come down now, getting a little bit more armor for Plies, as well as clear up this board, but it is only a 12-3, so going to be quite easily dealt with on Jarla's side.
Indeed. This could just end up being the Galakron turn, since he is fully invoked here, so we can now go for the counter-lethal push with this giant board, plus the Pyroblast from the Claw.
Do you remember this? The old Galakron Alex Go? Oh.
Yeah.
These are the good days.
Yikes. Those are not the good minions, though.
No. I don't think he needed them to be. I think you just need them to exist more than anything. Now he has Swing, Kronk, Steal 5, Nether Breath, Heal 4. That is 14 damage, which looks like lethal.
Does indeed, let alone the 3-2 that he has hanging around on board.
Yeah.
Xbylize did find his Blastmaster Boom, but way too late at this point. Only 1 bomb remaining in the deck, so that is just Vanilla Boom, which unbelievably is not even a particularly good Hearthstone card anymore. But aside from that, Nether Breath, Kronk's weapon, Jarla back in the comfort zone. His baby's back. Galakron Warlock picking up the win. Xbylize fails at his first attempt to pick up a win with the Bomb Warrior. And I feel like, again, just on a soul read, on a personality read from Xbylize, he's going to be the kind of guy that's just going to jam Bomb Warrior in this series until it works. I've just got a feeling, Raven.
Yeah, and I think that although that again, Jarla looked comfortable throughout most of the game, that life tap into Galakron, if that wasn't Galakron, then that game does continue just a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it still looks like to be in Jarla favored, but those are just the moments where you think, whoa, like, was there a gap there where a couple of bombs go off and then suddenly the game ends out of nowhere and you don't know what happened? There is a certain little bit of risk there, but Jarla, especially with that early weapon removal, looked very safe to me.
Yeah, and I think on reflection, I think the tap actually makes a lot of sense. He knows he's exhausted most of the damage in the deck, apart from Blastmaster Boom, and the Galakron Hero Power, which is a lot of damage over time, but very small amounts of damage incrementally on each occasion. So since there's 2 bombs in the deck, I think it actually makes sense there for Jarla to almost want to draw a bomb. Firstly, because it nerfs the Blastmaster Boom, and secondly, it's because it was only one of 3 remaining cards that he needed to activate his Zephyrus, right? Which, again, almost goes to show you how solid that matchup is, where a lot of the time it feels like Veiled Worshipper is actually the card that makes that deck tick. A lot of the games previously where we saw Galakron Warlock fail, it's because they didn't draw Veiled Worshipper. Veiled Worshipper was one of the 2 of still in Jarla's deck that he needed to activate his Zephyrus. So even without that card available, just because he hit the Kobold Sticky Fingers early, like the game just seemed largely over. Like xBlyzes was struggling straight away from that initial Wrench Caliber, and maybe we would have liked to have seen something a bit more creative in terms of getting a win condition, because I certainly tried the brute force approach in my my first few attempts at testing that matchup in our practice sessions, and oh boy, does it not work. Like, there's so many things that just shut you down so quickly.
It doesn't. I was just checking to see if I could see what xBlyzes has locked in, but he's not quite decided yet. So we are going to go to a break while we get ready for our game number 2. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Dumb compliment? Well,
I'm very proud that I'm able to cook minute rice in 50 seconds.
I can remember one from where I was back in high school. Somebody was trying to open a pen. Super trivial.
When I used to win a bunch of card game competitions and I was like 10, 11, everybody else was 17, 18.
All the strong kids in the class tried to open that pen, and none of them could get it done.
I won tennis tournament, so it's for me it's an achievement.
I was like, give it to me, and I looked at it for like 10 seconds, played a little bit around with it, and I was like, here. I was really proud of it in that moment.
We are back and about to get into our game number 2 between xBlyzes and Jarla, and so far the strategy is working. Subtle Jarla takes a pretty decisive victory in game 1 with that Galakron Warlock over the Bomb Warrior of xBlyzes. I'm going to take a quick look. Still hasn't decided yet, or at least it's not in the sheet. So it looks like Jarla does have, of course, his Druid and his Priest to beat this Bomb Warrior effectively. Yes, the decks have chances versus the rest of xBlyzes lineup, but the key target is that warrior, and guess what, Subtle? Sometimes you are right. xBlyzes has queued that warrior again.
Yeah, I mean, I was being slightly facetious earlier when I said forget about the rest of xBlyzes lineup. It doesn't really matter. There is a decent amount of this tech that splashes onto the Demon Hunter as well, which is why after the nerf was announced, I kind of changed my mind a little bit on whether this was a viable strategy, because as we talked about in the intro, felt like there was going to be an upswing of Demon Hunter because of the downswing of Druid, right? So then suddenly, if you can reliably have opponents that have both Bomb Warrior and Demon Hunter, feels like you're actually in decent shape to be doing something like this. But Jarla is going to be moving on to this Fatigue Druid, the Quest Druid, which, again, we feel incredibly confident that this does the job that it's supposed to do in terms of beating Bomb Warrior. I do think it's an extremely bad deck outside of that, and I think if you understand how to pick it apart with any other real Hearthstone deck that doesn't have a win condition that relies around weapons, you can get the job done very, very easily. Although we did see it pick up wins against Tempo Mage against Silvername last week as well, when Wama was playing this lineup. But when it comes down to brass tacks of just beating up Bomb Warriors, I think this deck is excellent at what it does.
Yep, and here's going to be the Bomb Warrior that it's got to beat. And there is nothing outside of the Risky Skipper Pirate package that really stands out here. So there's not, an odd inclusion. It's not the list with Zephyrus in it that some of the other French players have brought. Mm-hmm. So there isn't really even an X factor for me in this deck that'd be like, oh, well, what if? There isn't. The deck's probably about as standard as you're going to get. And that's the big problem here. And I think for this to go wrong for Jarla, he would have to draw his deck from most expensive to least expensive card in that order and then skip Sticky Finger. That's the kind of ridiculous draw we're talking. And then Jarla would have to literally go weapon early, swing, all the bombs go off and game ends. Yep. But that is obviously incredibly unlikely. So once again, an uphill climb for Blyze in this game. And obviously, depending on the outcome of this match, I'm going to make a complete judgment that I'm a little bit surprised more players, especially this week, haven't gone for this strategy, because if this continues to work how I would imagine it being played out, this almost feels like a free win.
To an extent. We're seeing what happens when it works, but we've also seen it fail spectacularly, right? As soon as the Bomb Warrior gets through, everything falls apart. And I think clearly this lineup is still in the refinement phase where it's going through different iterations week on week on week. And we saw the original build, and we saw Tempo Mage come in instead of the Shaman after the Shaman failed. Sorry, the Turtle Mage, which then didn't get the job done either. So now with the Turtle Mage nerfed, now we're looking for another answer. Now it's the Galakron Warlock, which does seem to, at least based on our one game sample size here in Europe, to be getting the job done. But certainly, it still relies on a lot of things, right? You need your opponent to have Bomb Warrior. Maybe there's a slight chance if they have Demon Hunter and they don't have Bomb Warrior. And even then, that you need them to have not done anything creative with their Bomb Warrior that fights back against you. Like we saw with, potential for Kargath Bloodsworn Mercenary to just add all these extra threats into your deck and go to Fatigue. Adding a Zephyrus in there as well. Adding a Rattlegore in there so that you can just go extremely late against these decks that don't really have a good way to deal with that in a lot of situations. So there's definitely things that your opponent can do that's extremely scary for you when you bring a lineup this linear. So it's always a risk. It's never going to be just the core strategy, right? It's just part of the Conquest metagame that needs to exist. You need to be able to punish people for being too predictable. But that risk is then assumed largely by you, the player bringing the heavily targeted lineup. So it depends where the equilibrium falls on whether that any individual player feels like that's worth doing or not.
Yeah, and you can see it looks like we're pretty much going to go from top to bottom here with Jarla's lineup, right? He's already got a win on the Galakron Warlock. He's likely to get a win on this Fatigue Druid against Warrior. Then it is going to come down to that Control Priest. And obviously we've seen Priest do, tear Warrior apart, especially when it's built like this. Mm-hmm. But it does feel to me that is the... if we have to put a question mark on one deck, I would have to put it on Priest. For Jarla, so maybe we are going to finish with the two decks that arguably must win with Warrior versus Priest in game number 3. I'm excited to see it if we do.
Yeah, apologies for the slight delay here. I believe Jarla had a little bit of a technical issue, but I can see they are back in a test game right now with their banned deck, so we should be starting up again very, very soon. So we take one more look at these standings, and you can see what I'm talking about here, about the implications of this matchup for both of these players, and because largely their positions could just straight up reverse here. If Jarla were to pick up a win and go 3-3, and Blyze were to do the same, suddenly tiebreakers come into play. Jarla gets a big boost to his tiebreakers by beating a player with 3 wins, and would start climbing right up towards the top of that division, with everyone, of course, still left to play. But just with how congested it is in the middle of that pack, all of these matchups between these players coming up today, tomorrow, and Sunday are crucially important for the threat of relegation bracket versus the promise of playoffs and a world championship spot.
Well, let's kick it off. We are into game number 2 again. Apologies for the slight delay, but we are good to go. It's this Fatigue Druid going up against Bomb Warrior once again for Blyze. And what are you oofing at, Sol?
Lucent Bark. That in the early game, or just in the opening hand, Lucent Bark not being like one of your last 5 to 10 cards is enormous in this deck in general, and particularly in this matchup, because it's so much extra functional healing just to force Blyze to deal with a taunt every single turn in order to be hitting face. And you can't really preserve all of your healing effects until you draw Lucent Bark, right? You have to spend your mana. You have to play Hidden Oasis because it's just one of the biggest threats in your deck, and also your opponent is trying to pressure you down with bombs. So having that Lucent Bark nice and early means that he was quite likely to be able to just play it on curve here and then get a ton of value out of all of these constant healing effects. But right now, there's a different problem that needs to be solved, and that's dealing with this weapon straight up.
Yeah, I feel like I might have cursed Jarla a little bit when I talked about the Ordering Witch's drawing his deck. Like, the Lucent Bark, you broke down very well why the card is good to have in your hand early on. Get it cooking in the game pretty quickly. But, Wormrest Purifier, Archivist Elysiana, these are not cards Jarla really honestly probably ever wants to see in a game, wants to have won at that point, but realistically these are your backup oh no cards towards the much later end game, whereas having them in the hand now, I think Jarla would much prefer some other choices.
Yes and no. Remember, this deck is...
I see you're sitting on a fence.
Yeah, this deck is kind of unique in that, to an extent, it doesn't actually care how many bombs go in the deck. As long as it can keep restabilizing the health total, it doesn't instantly lose if you just don't destroy all the weapons and all the bombs go in your deck, because you can just Wormrest Purifier them away. And then at that point, the bombs are neutral cards, so they just transform into random Druid cards instead. So actually having the combination of Wormrest and Archivist in the opening hand almost is weirdly beneficial, because it does give him that out. Don't get me wrong, he'd much rather have swapped those cards for 2 weapon destructions, and then the game would be completely solved. But this deck has so many redundancies and backup plans that, other versions of this same strategy don't really have. That you have this nice little security blanket of being able to say, okay, no big deal. If a bunch of bombs go in there, I can just shuffle them away. And that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And now that Jarla's got the sticky fingers, he is going to be feeling much more comfortable, because that was my overall point, right?
Yes.
They're definitely playable cards, but yeah, I'd much rather have those weapon removals, considering he's getting absolutely smacked around by this Wrench Caliber right now.
He is. He is indeed.
And even this, even though we can see it's going to be stolen, it's still going to deal 4 this turn.
Yep.
Then there's another bomb in the deck.
Yep.
It does start to add up. Like, it might be a little bit too much too soon for Jarla.
Oh, that's a potentially huge draw, though. You just do it, right? Sticky finger, get your sticky finger back, and then heal up. Nutty.
Yeah, and then he can always switch out next turn because he has the Beetle, for example, and maybe the Wormrest, depending on how scared he is. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he just needs to survive this turn. So this always seems to do the job for me, because if he didn't do this, then he takes another swing and a potential additional bomb the turn after.
Ah, so sick. Take out your sack it and you sack it, and you just get your Kobold back in hand. Insane.
Again,
Blyze just doesn't care. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely.
does draw
love
cards
it.
though, which is reasonable anyway.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, 2 bombs back into the deck now. 4 have been shuffled in total, but 2 of them have been drawn up until this point. And both of the Wrench Calibers have now been stolen and not destroyed, which is crucial because we know Blyze does play a Horde Pillager in his deck. So now Jarla just has to play for a bit of stabilization. Hope he doesn't draw those bombs. He can transform them away so they're not a threat in the long term. And then he can start up the Lucent Bark train and start playing Nourish, draw through his deck. I'm saying a lot of things here, and things unfortunately cost mana, and that mana does need to be spent. So that could create a problem for Jarla in the long term.
Right, that's the if we're going to go for a drawback of Sticky Fingers, right? It is expensive and a bit of a rubbish minion, like stats wise, right? So even just playing that means okay, he can't beetle as well this turn. So although he's still safe, but you know there's no major issue right now. It is a minion that, funnily enough, sometimes you actually can't afford to play, even if it steals a weapon. Because sometimes, like, especially when you look at more reasonably against Demon Hunter, it's just too slow because your opponent's still probably got minions on board at that point, right? So you steal the weapon, but you play a whole turn making a 4/4, and then they just go face with the minions, which is, of course, a big difference between Demon Hunter and Warrior for now.
I do really like this decision from Jarla as well, just to play the Wormrest Purifier now. Like I said, both Wrench Calibers have been stolen at this point, so he knows there's no threat of a third Wrench Caliber at any point. So that's the most bombs that are ever going to be in his deck. So not only does it stop him drawing them, it was also going into Blyzes turn 7, so he immediately turned a potential Blastmaster Boom into a War Golem by just straight away just curving out Wormrest Purifier, drop it down, transform those minions. And that, I believe, was a bomb, right? I don't think he plays Swipe naturally in his deck.
I'm almost... No, he doesn't play Swipe.
Yeah. So that was actually a bomb on the top of his deck, I think.
If Jarla found room for Wormrest Purifier, 4 weapon removals in this deck, and a Swipe, I'd be impressed.
Yep.
But yeah, you are right, that was a bomb.
Well, actually, it could have been an Acidic Swampooze as well, of course, since he hasn't drawn either of those up until this point.
Yeah. Or a Sticky Finger, right? He's only played one, technically.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. It was sat back to the hand. Yeah. Good point.
So Blyze now knows this weapon cannot be removed. Game on.
Sands of time run low.
This feels like the turn. This feels like the get this wrong and lose turn to me.
It does! Oof. Okay. Is that 5 armor from the Beetle? Of course. Right, so
yes.
Going to help him draw. Get to those heals. Jarla just needs heals right now.
He does. And I do like this decision to just go ahead and draw here because of, you know, Healing Touch, Hidden Oasis, all of these cards that he can pick up that potentially just break the game wide open. But right now, he is not finding them, and he's not finding the freedom that he needs to be able to play out this Lucenberg either.
He's got Lucenberg.
Yeah, I got Lucenberg. He is kind of a Berg, let's be honest.
Yeah. This is a bit of a board as well, and if Jarla's using resources to clear this board up, then he probably isn't healing as well, although he's on 10 mana, of course. Blyze still gets to keep swinging this weapon. Then he has Horde Pillager. At any moment he could draw into Galakron, of course. Like, oof, this is spicier than I thought, Sol.
Yeah, this is getting extremely close now. Blyze is a Galakron or an upgrade away from actually being able to put something together and threaten lethal situation here. Swipe will clear this board. Wait. What?
Go Swipe. Wait.
He wants to lead Wrath and draw. It's fine. I mean, if he wants to draw, he wants to draw, right? It's fair enough.
Run low.
Oh, Steel Beetle might end up being clutch here. Does he feel like he has the free turn he needs?
Oh.
Yeah, this seems reasonable. I mean, this is another one of the reasons why I do actually like this deck in the matchup, is that you do have this ability to counter pressure, right? You don't have to be purely defensive in the way that Control Shaman did, for example. So you can actually force the warrior to spend mana on removing your threats as well as hitting you in the face. Oh, yes. There it is. Does he have time for a Lucent Bark, though? That's the question. I think he does, right? I think he can Steel Beetle Lucent Bark here, yeah.
I agree. The only
also
weird
just
issue
Gift of the Wild.
That is true. I was just going to say, the only weird issue is that does kind of just make Brawl so much better, right? If he goes Lucenbark and heal. Obviously, he can heal and gain the taunt back anyway, but I just wonder if there's never a turn that gets there, right?
I don't
There's nothing.
think so. Okay. I think, like the Wild was actually the play that was weak to Brawl, right? If you just went Beetle, Gift of the Wild. I think
Sure,
Gift of the
sure.
Wild is just a huge bait here. And like if you get this Brawled and your Lucent Bark dies, and then you have another minion survive as well, you're just on the train, right? It's just Healing Touch next turn, then maybe you draw a Hidden Oasis. Like this game is approaching the lockout situation, even though it looked so close for so long up until this point.
It is, yeah, it is. And I like BlyzEs' approach here, because if you look now, even
Boom.
if it's Lucent... Okay, that's a big deal. Yeah, okay, just go back to full health. BlyzEs concedes. Because if you look at this from BlyzEs' point of view, he has like multiple ways to get through a Lucent Bark this game. The only problem is he doesn't have the damage follow-up once a big heal comes down. Or I guess
How
2 big heals come down.
curious.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like
Maining at this point.
the Ghidra Hidden Oasis this
Yep.
turn, I think it feels
Me too.
extremely safe.
So
And
many
sets up lethal.
contradictions.
Yes, I think Ghidra is fine here. I think Jarla's fear is that this might potentially be overcommitting again, but I don't think there is such a thing with the hand and deck that he has remaining at this point. I think he's absolutely comfortable to go through.
You can even just trade into the 4-2, right? Like, he doesn't need to keep the Beetle on board either.
Contradictions.
Yes, it's very fair. I guess Deathwing breakpoints is something that you have to look at here as well. So if he makes a 6-6, a 4-8, and then this is a 7-10.
Oh, so the Deathwing could kill everything but the Ghidra, right?
The Deathwing goes right. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Plays around Bladestorm as well.
Yeah, this is... Oh, it's a good effort from BlyzEs, but this is a tough one. Everything did get cleaned up, and he still has the Deathwing available, so there's still, on BlyzEs' side, a chance at a push, but suddenly all the removal's gone now, so his ability to actually punch through defenses each turn is just going away very quickly.
How curious.
You know,
Now, at least. But there is still a Hidden Oasis left remaining in the deck.
Refreshing. No more nice.
okay, so it looks like here the swipe coming down for the 1-3, just to clean everything up. Jarla's going to keep drawing cards, and I believe that is going to be the win there for Jarla, and he is just one more step towards victory there as he goes 2-0 against BlyzEs here. This is looking good overall for him, and he only has that Priest left to deal with now.
He does, and the Priest, as you mentioned, might just have a little issue here and there because it's kind of a weirdly mid-rangey deck with these...
Nope, we've lost Saul, I think. I'll just carry on. The Priest does have a bit of a weird issue. I'll carry on with what I think Saul was going to say. Raven is awesome. He is the best. He's the greatest caster ever. But more seriously, the Priest does just have those general weaknesses. As we said, this isn't even close to an extreme list like Fatigue Druid is for purposely built to kill Warrior. This is much more of a deck that is a solid deck against Warrior in general, with some tech, with a lot of tech inclusions if we're going to count the Kartut defenders and the 4 weapon removals as well. So this, for me, is just the deck, especially once the Warriors banned out, that has the most likely chance that BlyzEs can just sneak past there. But it's still going to be very difficult. Once you get those Kartuts starting to stick, even Cabal Acolytes as well, and Apotheosis, all these are the tools Priest normally has to help out versus Warrior. And with those weapon removals, if the Priest can get to them fast enough, it's going to be a real big deal, a real big problem for BlyzEs to actually deal with here. And for me, it's all just about whether these Sticky Fingers, or I guess Oozes to a certain extent, will be kept in opening hands or even got to at all, because Priest can draw a lot of spells with the help of those Cleric of Scales and some Raised Dead, but can't really get hold of the minion-based weapon removal overall. think Sol might be back for me now. I'm not sure.
Hey, I'm here. I'm not
Oh,
entirely
you said-
sure what's
okay.
happening. I'm kind of used to a very specific type of issue on these broadcasts,
It's a
and this
different
isn't
one.
it. Yeah, I have no idea how to deal with this one.
Yeah, it really
Yes,
is just going
it
to come
is.
down to this priest.
It is, and I do like it's a weird situation because I do think the priest is the least likely to beat the bomb warrior of the 3 decks, but I also think it's potentially the most likely to beat any other given
Sure.
Hearthstone deck because it is so close
That's
to
true.
just being regular 2-ofs priest. So since he's picked up the wins where it matters with the other 2 decks, I think he is still in a very, very comfortable position in the series overall. Because as I said, it can be vulnerable to Bomb Warrior if it doesn't hit the weapon removals, but by that same metric, it can still be incredibly strong against other decks if it doesn't draw the weapon removals, and it's just regular priest, right? So I think Jarla should feel relatively comfortable here because he almost has a free roll at this point where this is his good matchup, and even if he doesn't get over the line, he's still very much in the series.
And I this is just a big deal here. This opening hand for Jarla, he has a sticky fingers, which means that he's got the plan, right? Because that is just the general fear, not drawing the weapon removal minions, meaning you have to play a much more honest matchup here. But he does have that, and although his hand isn't really popping off in terms of having Sethic or the Cleric of Scales or anything like that in the early game, he also doesn't appear, at least on his end, to be facing down any weapon yet, as he, one, hasn't gone into turn 4, but most importantly, hasn't seen a Corsair Cash yet.
But nothing really developing so far in Jarla's opening hand. He's kind of just waiting for the game to kick off, which he's absolutely fine to do in this scenario. And Blaze is absolutely fine to do in this scenario. Nothing fancy in any of these matchups so far from Blaze. He's, yep,
see it, bro?
100%. Just play the Wrench Caliber and cross your fingers.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid you needed both sets of fingers crossed, potentially behind your back as well there, Blaze, because that was absolutely not enough.
And though Jarl, of course, going to take his time, I don't foresee a great reason to not go for the sticky finger here. It denies the Wrench Caliber, denies some Wrench Caliber buffs, and even if there is a second one, it would more or less put the sticky finger in the pool for if he draws a Raised Dead. Then he could get another sticky finger and not have to draw his natural one. So it just ticks all the boxes. Yeah, I'm just going to consider everything, but... Oh, okay! Blaze is just done. A smile from Jarla, and if he didn't smile, I'll be shocked because that is just a funny way to end the series there. Blaze just deciding that, nope, I cannot get through this. He got the weapon steal on curve, and that's what I was saying right at the beginning. If Priest just gets the minions, the only real hope you've got is if they just don't draw the weapon removal, at least on curve. And he did, so it was a tough one. Can't blame Blaze for that.
I was about to go super deep there talking about potential lines because actually when you're playing Priest, I think there's a lot of value in sticky fingering the Ankar because the one thing you don't do, as you mentioned before, is draw cards. So if you sticky finger an Ankar, your Ankar draws your other sticky finger, so you're then tutoring another weapon destruction out of your deck. But at that point, you brought up the plus side, which is immediately Sticky Finger goes into your Raised Dead pool as well. You make sure that a Wrench Caliber doesn't get broken, so you've shut off Horde Pillager because you steal it away. They don't get to swing it again and break it. You could potentially hold and try and bait the upgrade, so you then steal the upgrade as well. I had all these possible things in my head that I could have done to break down this and actually come up with some analysis. And then Blaze just saved me all the trouble. He just said, nope, if you've got the Sticky Finger, I'm out. I've had quite enough of this. Thank you very much. This is literal torture, and I'm off to do something else with my day.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, the sticky finger in the opening hand